Inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome into the latest edition of Tider Insider TV, brought to you, as mentioned, by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. As always, we're enjoying some nice cold ice water in our Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports tumbler. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. We've got a jam-packed show, Rod. Everything is going on right now. It's that time of the year where practically everything's being played, including, of course, Alabama men's basketball in action twice this past week, and a couple of big wins on the road at Vanderbilt and then at home against South Carolina. Alabama got the big win by 2 last week against Vanderbilt in Nashville, then came home against South Carolina in a game against a red-hot South Carolina team. But Alabama jumped out big, 50-27 at halftime. Javon Quinterly, 18 first-half points. However, as has been the case with this Alabama team, helter-skelter, South Carolina cut it all the way down to 6 in the second half. It got hairy, but the Tide pulled away late. They win it after a 32-13 run to close out the game, 90-71. Alabama moves to 19-10 overall, one win away from 20, and 9-7 in the SEC. Jaden Shackelford had 21. So after losing to Kentucky the week before, the Tide able to get 2 big wins. Now they've got 2 games remaining tomorrow night against Texas A&M and then on Saturday at LSU. And Rodney, Alabama is in good shape, let's just be honest, for the NCAA tournament. They're going to go for the second consecutive year. That'll be the first time since Mark Gottfried was coach that Alabama has gone to back-to-back NCAA tournaments. Now the SEC tournament can certainly help their cause as far as the seeding. I think they right now would probably be on the 5 line. I think they have a chance to move up to the 4 line. The thing about this team, yes, they've been up and down. We know they're the only team in the SEC to lose to Georgia, the only one. But they're also, a team that's capable of beating Houston and Gonzaga and Baylor and Tennessee, and you can go on and on. So when you've got good Alabama, you got one of the best teams in the country. Yeah. When you got bad Alabama, you've got a team that can, it seems, lose to just about anybody.
Well, we saw kind of in that South Carolina game, I thought that was the best first half.
It was incredible.
Played.
Yeah, it was terrific.
And then the first 8 minutes of the second half.
Horrible.
South Carolina goes on a 25-8 run. But Alabama, of course, regained their composure, played really well. But, Gary, one thing that is really, when you look at this team, the key, Javon Quinterly. Alabama is 14-5 when he scores 19 or more points. He's scored 19 or more in 3 of his last 4 games. So Quinterly is really that spark plug.
Yeah, and it makes sense. With the way Alabama plays, as fast as they play, the way that they shoot from the outside, your point guard has got to be a guy that runs the team. You say, well, they're running up and down a lot, but still, there is method to the madness. And when Javon Quinterly is in the game, the offense runs through him, whether he's shooting or whether he's setting up other people. You're right. When he plays well, I like to say Alabama's a dangerous team, but when he plays well, they're not just dangerous. They're really good. And what I'm hoping now, Rod, is, you got the game tomorrow night at home against Texas A&M, then you close it out on Saturday against LSU. They're going to get to 20 wins if they can win one of these next 2 during the regular season. Take a lot of momentum into Tampa for the SEC tournament. I believe that this is a team. Last year's team was just a great team, but they didn't get past the round of 16. I think this team, because of who I've seen them beat this year, they're the type of team that could get into the NCAA tournament as a 5 seed, a 4 seed, and I think potentially make a run all the way to the Final Four.
Well, they possibly could. This is a team that, again, we talked about it. I think right now you want to hit your peak, obviously, as we start to move towards March Madness. And I think this team gaining a lot of momentum. We've talked about Quinterly playing well. More guys are stepping up. I think Davidson's playing really well. Several of the other players have certainly stepped up their game. So when you look at it, Gary, this team is really starting to mature a little bit and develop. And if they can continue to do that, moving into the SEC tournament, could be a real dangerous team. Yeah,
back-to-back seasons going to the NCAA tournament. As I said, that hasn't happened since 2006. 16 years ago. Well, now it's time for Coach Talk. Alabama men's basketball honored all of its seniors on Saturday, including the scholarship players that won't be back. Javon Quinterly, James Rojas, and Keon Ellis following Saturday's win over South Carolina. Here's what Alabama head coach Nate Oates had to say about this special group.
Great win for senior night. Really happy for those 5 guys that we started. Look at 3 guys we honored after the game with Quinterly and Keon Ellis and Rojas and what they've accomplished in the 2 years they played here. It's arguably the best 2-year span we've had here in close to 30 years. I mean, they've taken this program to new heights from where it was when they got here. I couldn't be more happy for them, more thankful for their help getting it here.
I also want to mention that even though they were honored last year and they chose to come back for an extra year, so they weren't honored after the game, but Britton Johnson and Tyler Barnes, 2 walk-ons that have been here for a long time, they started that game against South Carolina and didn't just play a minute or two. They played like 6 minutes.
Sure,
and Alabama had the lead when they left, so that's pretty awesome too, Rod. The seniors that he mentioned, though, and Javon Quinterly's listed as a junior, but he's not going to come back. You heard Coach say it. You know, they transferred in here from other places, but were part of the turnaround last year to be in the SEC champions, regular season and tournament champions, number 2 overall seed, Sweet 16, and now to follow that up with what is probably going to be a 20-win season and back-to-back bursts in the NCAA tournament. That's pretty cool.
It's really cool. Look, I think they blended really well. Obviously, Gary, they made the adjustments they had to make, and you know, I think they were fits for what Nate Oates does. So I think that really made the adjustments much easier.
And the Alabama women's team went to the NCAA tournament last year for the first time in more than 20 years. Well, you know what? They're probably going to have to win the SEC tournament to make it back. But they are finishing the season in style. They honored their seniors on Sunday against Vanderbilt, and then Alabama went out and won the game 77-71. It was their 3rd win in their last 4 games, their 4th win in their last 6. So they're going to go into the SEC women's tournament in Nashville beginning tomorrow. They're the number 11 seed. Guess who they play? Number 14 seed Auburn. They've beaten Auburn twice already during the regular season. They swept the Tigers. In fact, they've won 6 in a row over Auburn, but you know that won't mean anything tomorrow at 1:30. Again, you know, Alabama women aren't going to make the NCAA tournament unless they win the SEC women's tournament, which is a very long shot, to say the least, with teams like South Carolina and Tennessee and so forth, although they have beaten Tennessee. But still, Rod, you know, finishing the season strong. You know, they had some COVID issues with this team. They've had some injuries. They lost a lot of players from that team last year. But you have to feel good about the way they're closing this thing out.
Yeah, you do. Again, you know, sometimes you don't start as well, but the team came on strong. And, you know, like you said, Gary, they do have an opportunity in the SEC tournament. You never know. You get a hot team. They could win a few games and finish really strong.
Yeah, and if not the NCAA tournament, at least get into the postseason this year. All right, still to come on Tider Insider TV, Alabama football adds 2 more analysts to the staff. And also, they lost a key member of the football staff as well. And his impact on the team has been terrific. What will it mean to lose one of the strength coaches? Matt Ray will have that for you. Also, softball had a fun weekend down on the Bayou. The Louisiana trip for the Crimson Tide was very, very good, to say the least. We'll be back with that. And, of course, later on, we'll be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, the phone number, 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. There's the email address. You can also tweet at us. Use that hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, Tider Insider TV. And welcome back to TITV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. And Alabama softball was in Louisiana this past week. They had a regular season game on Thursday night against Louisiana down in Lafayette, where Allison Habits and Coach Murphy were honored. That's kind of where they started their careers. Coach Habits played there. Coach Murphy started his coaching career there. They took care of that game 9-1 in 5 innings. Then they went to the Mardi Gras Mambo down in Youngstown, Louisiana, against Nicholls State, Southeastern Louisiana, Northwestern State, Louisiana Tech, and Louisiana again. And all they did was win those 5 games by a combined score of 28-5. And moved an impressive 15-0 on the season. Montana Fouts, once again the SEC Pitcher of the Week. She's won the award already twice this year, 11 times in her career. Alabama back home against UAB tomorrow evening, and then they'll host the T-Mobile Crimson Classic this weekend with Texas and Miami of Ohio. Rod, this Alabama team, again, you know, it's 15 games in, all right? We understand that. 15 games, and got a lot of games left. But this team is dynamic. They are talented. They are solid in pitching, defense, and at the plate. I mean, they've got the look of a special team. They're chasing that 2nd national championship, their first in 10 years. We know what Oklahoma's all about. We know about UCLA and others, but this Alabama team right now looks to me like they obviously play with anybody in the country.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gary. I think this team's obviously loaded. You mentioned in every area, and now with the bats, they hit the ball with power. now a little bit more. Obviously, the pitching is dominant. We know how important that is. It does look like a team. But again, there's a long SEC season to go. Injuries sometimes can derail you. You know, where they had a couple last year. So, you know, let's hope that they continue on this pace.
But what a good-looking club. And it's not just Fouts in the circle. I mean, it's an entire pitching staff. And, you know, Kilfoyle and Torrance and Salter, you know, they could be number ones on a lot of different staffs around the country. But when you have Montana Fouts, you have, I think, the best pitcher in the game and 3 others to support her. All right, Alabama softball will welcome in the Texas Longhorns for that tournament this weekend. But Alabama baseball was in Texas this past weekend, taking on the top-ranked Longhorns there in Austin. And Alabama came into the weekend with a perfect 5-0 record. I think this was a very frustrating series. Alabama pitched great in the series. They lost game 1 Friday night 1-0, even though they out-hit the Texas Longhorns. They left the bases loaded twice. They out-hit them again on Saturday and lost 2-0. And then finally a close game on Sunday. They got their first run on a Diodati solo home run, but they lose that one 6-1. So they get swept. A lot of people were optimistic because they said, hey, they went toe-to-toe with the number 1 team in the country on the road, but they scored 1 run in 27 innings. And, you know, I guess I see both sides of the coin. I am happy that they played tough, but, you know, the game's about winning. And when you only give up 3 runs in your first 2 games, you need to be able to find a way to scratch across a run or 2 to have a chance to win those games, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah, you're right, Gary. I mean, the pitching was outstanding on Friday and Saturday. Certainly they had their opportunities, several opportunities, you know, to punch across some runs. Could not do it. You know, listen, I'm like you. I see both sides of the coin. I understand the optimism. You played really well. You pitched the ball well, or you pitched well on Friday and Saturday. But you know what? Listen. If you want to be a big-time program, eventually you have to break through. And they had opportunities in this game. Again, I understand Texas is a fantastic program. They've got a great team. They're number 1 in the country. But at some point, you've got to break through in these series.
And then when you come back from that series and you're at home for a Tuesday afternoon game against Tennessee Martin, you know what? You need to win that game. I understand you're throwing midweek pitchers, but still, Tennessee Martin's not Texas, and Alabama lost this afternoon 7-6. That's the 2nd straight year they've dropped a game to the Skyhawks, so a disappointing loss today for sure. All right, Rodney, let's change gears. Let's talk some football and some news that I think a lot of Alabama fans were disappointed to learn about, even though it's an opportunity for him to advance himself. Dr. Matt Ray, one of Alabama's 2 strength and conditioning coaches, along with David Ballou, is leaving to go to the NFL to join the New Orleans Saints. Great opportunity for him, but Dr. Ray has been a big assist to this Alabama football program, which was already great, but brought a scientific approach to strength and conditioning, and it's disappointing to see him go.
It is. Only been here 2 years. Of course, came in with David Ballou from Indiana a couple of years ago. Did a fantastic job, Gary. I mean, like you said, the scientific approach, that's the direction everything's going. I think he did a really fantastic job. But I'll say this, as disappointing as it is that he's leaving, Gary, I think he's laid a great foundation for whatever Nick Saban decides to do. Obviously, David Ballou's staying, so I think that's key, but bringing in someone with that same kind of expertise will certainly be something that's big.
All right, Dr. Ray is leaving, but more analysts are coming in. Nick Saban kind of revolutionized the whole approach of having offensive and defensive analysts. Guys that are on your staff, they can't coach on the field, but they can be in the meetings, they can be in game planning sessions, and a lot of these guys are guys that have been head coaches or certainly coordinators. 2 more coming in. It's not official yet, but it's reported that Todd Grantham is going to join the staff as a defensive analyst after being the defensive coordinator most recently at Florida, also Mississippi State, Georgia, Louisville, and now Cornelius Williams, who was a great player at Hoover High School and at Troy, and was the wide receivers coach for Brian Harsin this past year at Auburn until he got fired midseason. He's reportedly coming in as an offensive analyst. These guys are joining the likes of Derek Dooley, Zach Mettenberger, and others to give Alabama, you know, some more insight, some more eyes, and you know, in the film room, in the video room. And I think it's great when you get guys like Todd Grantham to join your staff as an analyst. That's super.
It's an impressive array of analysts, no question about that. You talk about Todd Grantham. You know, here's a guy, Gary, that has a lot of experience as a defensive coordinator, been very successful in several of his stops. He knows the Nick Saban system. He's coached with Saban, under Saban at Michigan State. He's a guy, you remember when Sarkisian came in a few years ago and, you know, was an analyst and then eventually ended up the offensive coordinator at the end of the year. He's a guy that if need be, he could step into a defensive coordinator's role, whatever it might be, because of the experience he has and the understanding he has of the defense.
And Cornelius Williams, a young and upcoming coach, as we said, was at Auburn. I don't know what happened there, but he's from nearby Hoover, and he'll be a nice addition on the offensive side of the ball for the Crimson Tide. All right, coming up on TITV, Alabama Gymnastics had a great meet against Missouri this past Friday night, and one gymnast in particular really took her performance up a notch. Stay tuned to find out who it was. And next, your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, the phone number 205-348-9882. Tider Insider TV. We want to hear from you, Tider Insider Nation, next, right here, when TITV continues. Bama Gymnastics picked up a nice win this past Friday night at Coleman Coliseum against 9th-ranked Mizzou. And a big part of that win was All-American Luisa Blanco, who finished with 3 top scores on the night in vault, bars, and, just was tremendous. 39.725 score in the all-around. And Bama won that meet by nearly a point. They'll host Arkansas on Friday night. And then we'll be in the Elevate the Stage meet in Huntsville on Sunday. All right, welcome back to TITV. Along with Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Let's get to the phone lines. We've got Walter over in Trussville. Hey, Walter.
Yes, I have a question about the Alabama basketball player that decided to take his COVID year and come back. How is this going to affect the scholarship that Alabama's already got?
Yeah, well, the bottom line is, Walter, you can't have over 13 on scholarship. Now, the last year you were allowed to have more because of, the first time around on the COVID, but that goes away. So it will not affect anybody coming in. All of their signings, I promise you, they're going to bring in. There's always a chance, as we know, that there's going to be attrition on the roster. There could be players that leave early for the NBA draft. There could be players that go into the portal. So just like we see it in football with Nick Saban, Walter, it'll work out. Obviously, Alabama wants Gurley to come back. I'm sure he, discussed it with Nate Oates before he announced that he was coming back, and they said, yeah, we'd like you to come back. So the bottom line is you can have 13 scholarship players, so he'll just have to fit into that 13.
Yeah, and it's good he's coming back.
Yeah, because he could really have a good year next year. This has kind of been a transitional year for him, but Noah Gurley's got some skills, and we're starting to see it more toward the end of the year. He can shoot the three, he can post up. He's got to be more of a dynamic rebounder and got to turn it over less. But next year, he could have a big year. All right, thanks for the phone call, Walter. We're going to take a break. We'll come back with more phone calls and maybe get an email or two as well. 205-348-WVUA, 348-9882. We'll be back with more TITV right after this. TITV continues with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. And let's get to the phone lines. Charles from over there in East Alabama, up in Center, is with us. Hey, Charles.
Hey, Gary. Thanks for taking my call. I want to ask about the other 7-footer that we had on the team last year. He got hurt, he couldn't play. Is he still on the team? I haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah, you're talking about Chiku. He is on the team, and he sits over there on the bench every game. He has not played. And to be honest with you, Charles, I don't know, what his situation might be in the future. I mean, he could be back or, he might not be back, but he's not played this year. And he is dressing for all the games. But obviously they're still trying to develop him. So, again, as I said, you just never know from year to year now in college basketball what might happen. But Alex Chico is a 7-foot guy, like you said, and, has a skill set but has not been able to break into the rotation this year. Hey, thanks for the phone call from over there in Center. Let's stay here in Tuscaloosa and talk to our pal CB. Hey, CB.
Hey, gentlemen, how y'all doing tonight?
Doing great.
I tell you, I went to the baseball game, buddy, and I'm open. Of course, I'm limping around, can't hardly get around, but are we ever going to turn the baseball around? Tuscaloosa loves baseball. I love it, and I don't know what it's going to take. It's just stuff that people run 2 runners, throw out at third. I mean, just stuff that just not supposed to happen,
Yeah, you don't want to make mistakes I agree with you. I mean, getting guys thrown out on base, getting guys to third with less than 1 out, not being able to get them home. In close games, you got to get those runs across. And it's one thing to lose at #1 ranked Texas, like we talked about. And I understand it's a midweek game, but still, you don't want to lose at home ever to Tennessee Martin. And this is 2 years in a row they've done it. We've talked a lot about this. So Rodney, I kind of get tired talking about it, but Alabama's behind. That's just the truth. They're behind in the SEC. So even though they're improving, when you look at the teams that are in front of them, you got teams every bit as good as Texas. Mississippi State and Vanderbilt and LSU and Florida. I mean, it goes on in this league. And, in Vanderbilt's case, they've got those merit-based scholarships, endowed scholarships that they bring in players on. These other states have the lottery that they can bring in Hope Scholarship players. Alabama and Auburn are working with 11.6, period. They don't even waive out-of-state tuition. So that's not an excuse, but it is a fact. Mm-hmm. You've got less margin for bringing in players and less margin for error. So when you're already behind these teams and you're trying to catch them, yeah, Alabama's signing some good players. But they're not signing players that are better than the teams that they're trying to catch. And those teams are already ahead of them. So I don't know the answer. It's been 1999 since Alabama's been to the College World Series. Coach Wells had several teams in the 2000s that I thought would make it but didn't. But the bottom line is it's been 23 years and counting. They did get to a regional last year, but I have to call it like I see it, Rod. And the way that I see it is Alabama is behind a lot of teams in this league. And so I don't know. I don't know the answer as to when Alabama, quote unquote, is going to be back, but it's going to be a tough go.
Well, it is. And, CB asked, would they turn it around maybe this season? Look, I thought that was a great opportunity at Texas. I know they're number one. We talk about how great they are and all of this, but you had opportunities. Mm-hmm. You didn't take advantage of them. At some point, you have to have a series. It's not about, as you said, Gary, it's not about staying close, and they just haven't been able to do that.
All right, thanks for the phone calls. We appreciate it. We're going to take our final break, and we'll come back with one more segment of TITV from Tuscaloosa live right inside our WVUA 23 studio inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. We're back after this. The Bama pipeline of the NFL will continue this year. 11 Crimson Tide players competing in the NFL Combine this week in Indianapolis. That's second only to Georgia with 14. Evan Neal, Brian Robinson Jr., Jamison Williams, John Mechie III, Slade Bolden, Fedarian Mathis, LeBron Ray, Christian Harris, Christopher Allen, Jalen Armour-Davis, and Josh Jobe will all take part. The Combine begins on Thursday and will end on Sunday. Roll Tide. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of TITV presented by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. A reminder that you can catch a replay tonight at 10:30, or you can find it at WVUA23.com anytime. It'll also be linked up at TiderInsider.com. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching, everybody. We're going to leave you with some video of Alabama women's basketball senior festivities from Sunday at Coleman Coliseum. Have a great night, everybody.